I don't know how many of you know this or even remember, but the little girl Tama that mentioned Ace in this chapter, which by the way, really good setup by Oda Sensei. Like, that's been in the works and build up for a very long time. But anyways, Tama mentioning Ace in a promise, that was a direct correlation to Oars Jr. and when Ace made him a hat. See, if you remember, in the Marineford arc, we found out a little bit more about Oars Jr. and how apparently Ace made him his signature hat and all that, and Ace was kind of terrible at it, and eventually he got better to where he could make a hat for Oars Jr. And we know he went to Wano thanks to that. We knew he's went to Wano for a very long time now. It's always been hinted at. And now, with the event of this chapter, we come to find out most likely who was the person that taught Ace how to make the hats. Now, I know many are going to say, whoa, Chibi, it's apparently this little girl Tama's 8th birthday. So, when you factor in the 2-year time skip to probably how much time it took Ace to learn, she's probably around 5 or 4. Which, yes, when you think about it like that, it does seem like a little girl at the age of 4 or 5 might not have been able to teach someone like Ace how to do hats and all that, make hats for Oars Jr., but at the same time, though, she definitely has a correlation to Ace being able to make the hats for Oars Jr. At the very least, that's what we can get from that dialogue alone from the chapter. But okay, anyways, the whole ordeal with Ace being mentioned in this chapter makes me incredibly sad, because this little girl that's been waiting for Ace for 2 years for some type of promise, obviously, she doesn't know. She doesn't know the truth of what has happened to the poor man. She doesn't know, that Ace died, apparently. Now, for all we know, it's been speculated that apparently Wano, since it's a closed-off country, they might not be able to get any type of news source. For instance, the outside news that they normally get, all of our characters get normally, Wano might not get any news whatsoever because, like I said, closed-off country. That means they won't allow news sources to come in, so everybody that lives in Wano might not even know of the events that happened in Marineford, what happened to Ace, what happened to really Whitebeard, unless, well, Whitebeard's iconic. I think everybody would probably know about Whitebeard, but in terms of Ace, though, they might not, and then the whole situation with what's going on with Kaido and Big Mom, most likely they might not know about that at all. Or, the person that's been watching over Tama, her master, most likely has kept her in the dark and didn't say anything, because obviously it would break her heart if it was really an incredibly important promise, for all we know. But okay, so that left me a little bit sad, not gonna lie, just the way that was done in this chapter. But okay, let's shelf that for now, though. Let's get into Luffy, and then I'll get back into Tama in a minute. So, Luffy, I really love how Oda showcased how much Luffy has improved as a fighter since his fight with Katakuri. I don't know how many of you noticed it, but in the chapter when Luffy was getting aimed at by the gun, like right before the man even fired his shot, Luffy was already in the process of hitting him. You could even see his foot coming into the panel, kind of on the side of it, before the man even knows what's going on, before he even, shoots Luffy or anything, which this perfectly represents Luffy's development as a fighter and learning better observation haki. As we know, when it came to the fight between him and Katakuri, he was put under a lot of stress, and his haki improved to a tremendous level, at a whole new level. And he was able to somewhat kind of see in the future. And because of that, I feel like that's what Oda was showcasing, that he is not shelving that development that Luffy got versus Katakuri. Luffy is showcasing that he is really good at observation haki now, being able to just take those people out like it's nothing. Yes, they're fodder, and Luffy would have had no trouble with them whatsoever. The point still stands is because of his observation haki being upgraded, he is able to wipe out people like it's nothing. I mean, look at how he fought against the dude on the mount. He just punched the mount up to stop the man from firing at him. So, Luffy's skill as a fighter now is pretty ridiculous. And it pleases me greatly to know that Oda is not kind of like writing that out of the story. Like, oh, this is a very strong power that Luffy has. It's really important. But I'm glad he's not just shelving it, not using it. Luffy is demonstrating that that was a really big fight to him, and it's going to have irreversible changes to his fighting style going forward in the story. story. But okay, anyways, Luffy's reaction to being separated is absolutely iconic. It's typical freaking Luffy. Like, what he says when he's like, where's my Vivi card? Where's my card and all that? He's like, oh, well, no, I guess that's that. And he just, he doesn't even care anymore. He doesn't even mention it whatsoever in the rest of the chapter. And I'm like, oh my god, of course, of all characters, Luffy would act that way. He's like, okay, nothing I can do. He's just so lighthearted. You can see that the poor man is always just the way he acts. I'm just like, oh my god, Luffy, please. But that's why we love Luffy as a character, just because of the way he acts. Speaking of Luffy as a character, he was very blunt like he normally is, but he was very well-mannered, which I was pretty surprised about. And I think many reading this chapter might be a little bit surprised about Luffy's interaction with Tama and what he did. For instance, when he was offered food, he was eating rice and all that. Yes, it wasn't like a whole lot compared to what Luffy normally eats. He ate it all up like it was nothing. He just, sucked that down. It's like, it's gone. And basically, he's like, is there any more? I want seconds and all that. But she's like, no, there isn't any more. There's nothing left. And he's like, oh, well. And you see him start licking the bowl, which shows that he still wants more. But he's like, I wasn't really that hungry anyways, which for Luffy, like normally how Luffy is, that was weird seeing him act like that. He was very well-mannered towards Tama in that moment, and it just like, I mean, I know Luffy is a good guy. Deep down, we know how good of a guy he can be, but I wonder if his interaction with Katakuri really changed him for the better. I'm very curious about that, because just the way he was well-mannered in that moment, he was like, I'd be fine, he could move on without needing to eat or whatever. I'm just like, whoa, Luffy, like, you're demonstrating some really good skills right now as a person. Like, you're being a decent person. Yes, you obviously are still, hungry. You're bad at lying, but I mean, you're doing something that is very weird for you. So that made me kind of happy to see Luffy acting like that. And then on top of that, the way, when she did leave and all that, like she was trying to leave and do her own thing, Luffy's like, she's a sweet girl and all that. Even though there wasn't a lot of food, she's a sweet girl and all that. And I'm like, yo, Luffy, I love you, man. You're doing a great job. Like, I don't know. It just seems like Luffy had a really mature air about him in this chapter. Hopefully I'm not the only one that noticed that. I mean, yes, he still is acting like typical Luffy, but he just seemed a little bit more mature. And, I think with all what happened in the Big Mom's arc, Whole Cake Island, I feel like he has probably developed, not just as a fighter, but as a person, too. And I think that's kind of what this entire chapter was trying to represent. Anyways, let's talk about the situation with Hawkins. So, Hawkins pops up in this chapter, and Yo, I mean, it's to be expected that we would see the man pop up eventually, because, I mean, we knew he had a connection to Kaido, and we know that kids, like, in prison, locked up, beat to a pulp and all that, he obviously didn't want to be an underling underneath Kaido. I mean, we knew the situation, all that, and seeing Hawkins in this chapter, it makes me very curious on what his objective is. Is he going to fight against Luffy and truly try to help out Kaido? Or is he going to try to save Kid? Does he have his own objective to get out of there? I'm very curious on what Hawkins wants. But if there's one thing very clear, I want to take a moment to point out his dialogue at the end. He's like, don't notify Kaido just yet. Which means that he is trying to do something, or he might be aware that Luffy is on his way, and that is why, he didn't say anything. For instance, why he doesn't want anything mentioned to Kaido is because he's like, this could potentially be Luffy, and he might want to talk to the man about something like some form of deal or whatever, which also could be, his skill as well. As we know, Hawkins, he loves to look at his cards, see the future or whatever, reading of the cards, so for all we know, he might look at the reading of his cards, he's like, oh, Luffy is here. The chances of Luffy being here is like at 99%, so maybe that's the reason why he knows it's probably Luffy, and he's walking over there to see if it really is him, before he can, start some form of convo. Now, if there's one thing we do need to take note of, is the fact that when we look at the previous arcs that we've gotten in the second half of One Piece, we know that Oda has been trying to give a lot of characterization to the worst generation, all the individual characters like the supernovas. And this time it seems like it might be more on Hawkins and Kid that could be getting a lot of development in the future, because that this is going to be focusing on Kaido or in Wano and stuff. So I am looking forward to it. I've always thought Hawkins was a really cool character. I loved his ability in the past when we were introduced to him, so I'm kind of curious to see what he's truly capable of, what surprises he has in store for us, but also how he's going to interact with Luffy. Because I don't think Luffy really has ever had an interaction with the man. I don't think so. I wonder if Luffy's going to just straight up call the man creepy or something. I'm kind of curious about that. But okay, anyways, let's get back into Tama. So, Tama in this chapter, apparently she's age 8, and she barely gets to eat anything. Like, today, apparently, in the manga, it was her birthday. And it was her 8th birthday. And apparently, she only gets rice 2 times a year. Once on her birthday, once on New Year's. And that's depressing as well. I mean, this is kind of a depressing chapter the more I think about it. There's some great moments, like funny moments, but it's a pretty depressing chapter because, I mean, the whole situation with Ace and all that, and then now Tama not being able to eat, and then the whole situation with the factories and stuff. It's some very dark stuff kind of being built up right here in this chapter, which I find fascinating. But apparently Tama, she gave up her only birthday present, her only food, to Luffy in this chapter, and I feel like that's going to hold a lot of weight for Luffy. I feel like he's going to realize, like, holy crap, this girl gave up her only food that she can get, like, twice per year to me, someone that gets to eat often all the time. I feel like the way it's going that, you know, Luffy's probably going to have Sanji make something really good for her this arc. I sense something like that happening. Like, Sanji's going to make a big feast for her, and she's going to be able to eat until she's bloated and just wants to fall over and take a nap or something. I definitely see something like that happening because that's definitely what Luffy would do to probably try to make it up to her. I mean, Luffy is a good guy. We know that. He would definitely do something like that. And then, on top of that as well, though, Luffy now knowing that Ace is connected to her, he's probably going to try to fulfill that promise that Ace definitely can't because, you know, he's dead. So I definitely see Luffy coming in as like, look, you know, my brother's dead. He's probably not going to be very subtle about it, knowing how Luffy is. He's probably going to be like, yeah, Ace is dead and all that. He's probably just going to say it like that, and she's going to be shocked and crying and all that. And he's like, don't worry, you know, I'll fulfill that promise that, you know, he can't do anymore because I'm his brother. I can definitely see Luffy doing that. So, yeah. Anyways, very fascinating chapter, setting up the situation with Luffy and what he's going to have to be going through, which I do want to point out the obvious here. The Straw Hat crew is separated. You know, I was going to mention it in the last chapter, but it's just like there was so much going on that I didn't really talk about it much, but let's tackle the elephant in the room. The Straw Hats are separated once again, and let's be real, many of us, we don't really want that to happen. I mean, we've had the whole situation with Whole Cake Island, the Dressrosa. The crew's been separated for a long time now. It's been years. It's been a long time since they were together in one arc working together. And Luffy basically getting separated, just like, come on, man. Like, come on, man. Like, please stop separating our characters. Like, we want to see all the Straw Hats work together. But at the same time, you got to realize that they're pretty OP. Like, a lot of our Straw Hats now are really strong. I mean, Nami's got Zeus now, okay? That's insane. And Zoro, the man cut, like, a dude in half in a lot of buildings and stuff with, you know, a blade without a handle. So, I mean, Zoro is obviously incredibly strong. Sanji is incredibly strong as well. He got a raid suit as well from Germa 66. So, I mean, a lot of our characters have gotten power-ups. I mean, when you think about it, it makes sense why Oda doesn't want them together, because they're just that crazy. But at the same time, we're going to be going up against maybe 2 Yonkos at the same time. So, the crew needs to be together. So, I really do hope, even though I do like seeing Luffy have a spotlight and focus in a chapter, I do hope that we're not separated from the crew for a very good long time, because I think, like, many can agree with me, we want to see everybody have interactions again. We want to see Luffy meet Frankie again, talk to him and all that. We want to see Luffy talk to Brook again. We just want to see all our characters together in one chapter communicating. And I just hope it's not going to take a long time for that to happen because of the situation Luffy is currently in. Now, speaking of the situation with Tama, though, apparently she got sick by drinking the water. And apparently the reason why she got sick is because the water is contaminated. It's completely polluted by the factory, you know, runoffs, which is like real life. That's the type of stuff that actually happens in real life. You know, people have factories set next to rivers, and then there's chemicals and runoff and stuff that go into the rivers, and it just pollutes everything. It ruins water supply. And so what's technically happening here is that Kaido's entire influence in Wano is literally sucking the life out of the environment. Like, he's ruining and tampering with the environment of Wano, and what was once a beautiful, probably lush area or greenery or whatever, is probably going to be tainted and looking like a steampunk type series or something, because, I mean, he's probably just ruined the environment with setting up so many factories. So, yeah, I feel like the kingdom we saw Zoro in a couple of chapters back, I feel like that was a front by Oda, basically showing that, yes, Wano's a beautiful place, but when you get to the lower levels to where the factories are, obviously it's going to probably look very heinous and ugly. I definitely see something like that happening the way Oda's trying to develop this arc. But I want to leave it at that. That's pretty much it when it comes to this week's chapter of One Piece. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Did you enjoy this chapter? Did you hate this chapter? Please be honest in the comments below. And how do you feel about Luffy showcasing his skills with his observation haki? Have a wonderful day or not wherever you live. Love you guys. Please be safe. Chibi out.